Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. So today we're going to continue the Memory Lane series, which is where we take a look back at some interesting articles or interviews from old Guitar World magazines. So my dad has been subscribed to Guitar World magazine for about 30 years now, and he was nice enough to let me borrow a bunch of them. So I'm very grateful for that. The edition we're going to talk about today came out in July 1999. Awesome cover there. And the article I want to share with you guys today was written by J.D. Considine about the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and it gets their perspective of how they created the Californication album, which came out right around the same time that this magazine was published. So I'm not going to read the whole article just for time's sake, but I'll share most of it with you guys. And let's see what he has to say. It says, because the interplay between the four is so intuitive and emotional, it's often impossible to reduce a Chili Pepper jam to a simple process of cause and effect. It's not like listening to another guy and hearing what he's playing and saying, "Oh, that's gonna make me do this," says Flea. When it's at its best, there's no thought involved. It's just like energy in the air. Inevitably, the band will go back to the best bits of a particular jam and try to develop them into a song. We all kind of know when it feels good, so if it feels good, then we'll record it, says Smith. We'll make little tapes, then Anthony will go and listen to them in the car. He'll come up with an idea, and he'll come back to us. It kind of goes around like that. The reason this record came out so good for me is because the music sort of told me what to sing, says Kiedis, the lead singer. I don't have to think too much about it. The music definitely implied what the vocals should be. All I had to do was close my eyes, and I could hear what my parts were. Which is a huge success from how it had been for a while, where either my head had been closed off or I wasn't as inspired by what I was hearing. But when John Frusciante came back, things just flowed. Ironically, even though things were rockin' when the four played together in Flea's garage, life outside rehearsals was just plain rocky. Kiedis and Frusciante were in the process of getting sober after dealing with long-term drug problems, while Flea and Smith were going through romantic difficulties, with Flea suffering through a painful breakup and Smith dealing with a divorce. The Chili Peppers don't subscribe to the you gotta suffer school of music making. We don't have to be tortured to make good music, Smith says flatly, but neither do they deny that there was some exceptional emotional energy at play in the making of this album. I listened to it the other day, and I thought, wow, it really is a pretty relaxed record, says Flea. And considering what we've been through, I would have thought it would be more edgy or something. I know for myself, a lot of times when we were recording the record, I was feeling so much emotional pain, hot and cold flashes and stuff, but it really is relaxed. For a moment, Flea is at a loss to explain how the album could feel so comfortable when he and his bandmates were in torment. Eventually, he suggests that when we're ultimately hearing in the album is honesty. The sound of four guys who aren't afraid to be open to one another. Being true to yourself is about being relaxed, he says. So I guess, even though you don't realize it at the time, when you're like in a romantic pain or some kind of pain like that, by feeling that pain and not running away from it, you're being honest. I guess you're relaxed when you're really being yourself, even though you might not feel it at the time. For his part, Kiedis was feeling awash in affection while the band was making music. That's reflected to a certain degree in the album's lyrics, which are far more romantic than the wham bam thank you ma'am attitude found in early Chili Peppers songs like Party on Your... It's one thing for Kiedis to come off all warm and fuzzy on ballad fare like Porcelain and This Velvet Glove, but there's even a sensitive romantic side to up-tempo funk rockers like Around the World. Now we gotta skip way ahead to page 199. Give me a second. Okay. There were a lot of romantic feelings, says Kiedis. That was definitely swimming through my heart, because that's what seems to be sexual descriptives, in different metaphorical ways, in the songs, but really, it's more about the romance of it than the physical feelings of... It's more the emotional feelings of love and life, intertwined with sexual rhythms and melodies. Life and love intertwined with sexual rhythms and melodies, that's the Chili Peppers in a nutshell. Still, it'd be a mistake to read too much into the band's lyrics. Kiedis admits that he's more interested in conveying content through sound than he is concerned with the specifics of word choice. It's kind of like the ancient language of Sanskrit, which was designed to have a sonic effect on your nerves and your emotions, he says. Even if you don't know what the word means in the dictionary, it still affects you with the feeling, just the sound of that word. So even if you don't read the lyrics and follow them in a linear fashion, they do have an effect on you, just the sound of them. That's something that John is very sensitive to. Well, at this point, I definitely have favorite lyrics, says Frusciante, but I didn't really focus on the lyrics, so much as the sound of the lyrics, until we were actually recording it. Frusciante's favorite is the song Other Side, which addresses the struggle between one conscious self and the other side. It's not a moral song in the usual sense. Separate my side, I don't believe it's bad, goes one part of the chorus, but neither does it suggest that the listener merely give in. It's the kind of lyrics that I really love, says the guitarist, just the sound of them, and also, I suppose, the vibe of the lyrics. They were inspired by 20th century mystic Aleister Crowley, and his books have a vibe that appeals to me in a great deal. It's just very emotional to me. When I listen to that song, the main thing I focus on is the lyrics, and I get chills every time certain parts come up. I used to get a chill during the intro, but now I get a chill at the bridge. The funny thing for me is, says Kiedis, some of the biggest chills I get when I listen to this record are actually from musical breakdowns, in the sections where there is no lyrics at all. Which may be because I stopped listening to myself and just listen to the overall vibe of what's happening. But it often happens to me that I get the biggest chill during bridges and guitar solos and musical outros and things like that. Kiedis adds that, as originally written, the songs on Californication had more in the way of instrumental interludes than they do on the finished version of the album. The bridge to Other Side is a case in point. Anthony didn't want to write lyrics for that section, says Frusciante, but Rick made him. Rick, of course, is producer Rick Rubin, who also oversaw the making of Blood Sugar Sex Magic and One Hot Minute. Rick and I got into a pretty funny argument in the studio, says Kiedis, because Rick thinks that a section doesn't have that much meaning until it has lyrics on it. Kiedis, by contrast, is a big fan of the band bits. I like very much the guitar solo in the middle of Californication, he says, because it seems like just the perfect amount of notes to tell a story during that song. When I listen to that guitar solo, it speaks to me in kind of a non-verbal language. I also like the intro to Around the World, because it's just pure, unconfined Flea-style energy, and when John comes in, it's a push everything to the limit sonic overload. It just comes flying out of the top of your head. In that particular case, John came in one day with that funky guitar part, says Flea, and that was just what I started playing on it. That's not false modesty on Flea's part either. As I learn more about music, I become less and less interested in doing anything fancy, he explains. Sometimes the simplest, boring little thing will make the song sound the best. I've become more about just serving the song, and less about, hey, I can play some really amazing trippy bass lines that will blow your mind. Of course, his simple song-serving bass lines can be pretty mind-blowing as well. Flea's bass playing on this record sounds to me like it's James Jamerson of the New Millennium wordsmith, and Flea starts laughing. "I'm serious," insists the drummer. As much as Californication benefits from the raw energy and uncluttered thump of the band's guitar, bass, and drums lineup, there are a number of points at which the arrangements are sweetened by synths and other keyboards. Much of it is fairly subtle, but there are a few moments where the keyboards come to the fore, as when Road Trippin' trouts out its retro, psychedelic Chamberlain solo. "That was Rick's doing," says Frusciante of the Chamberlain part. "None of us were there for that, but it was good. I liked it." Greg Kurstin of Geggy Ta plays keyboards on several tracks, and Frusciante himself added some sync to the title track. "I put a little thing on that with this synthesizer I have at my house," he says. "I tried to get the sound I hear on some Cure records." "Who played that thing on the chorus of Around the World?" says Kiedis. "Me and Flea," Frusciante answers. "We played an omnichord on the chorus of Around the World. It took a team of us to play that part, me and Flea and Jim Scott, the engineer. It's a simple piece of machinery. You just press one button and you hear a chord, but it took 3 of us to do it." Kiedis cracks up. "All they had to do was call me up, and I could have hashed that out for them, but..." Frusciante laughs and explains that the reason it took 3 people was the omnichord doesn't allow for chromatics. Not very omni, is it? So, we had to slow down the tape for 1 chord, and then speed it back up for the other 3 chords. That's why it took 3 of us. Flea was the brains behind the operation. He figured it out. Jim Scott was doing the technical part of it, and I was pushing the buttons for 3 of the chords. Flea may have masterminded the omnichord interlude, but nobody really dominated the band's decision-making process, as each member had veto power over the album's mixes and running order. For this record we cut, I think, 28 songs, says Flea, and not all of them got completely finished. How many did we finish, Chad, in the studio? 23? 24? Something like that, answers Smith. Yeah, like 24 songs were actually finished in the studio, and we're going to put 14 of them on the record. It was hard for us to agree which ones we think are the best. We all think differently about it, so we just kind of made a list of the ones that we all agreed on, and those are the ones we put on the record. But I can't say for sure that those are better than the ones we left off. And that takes us to the end of the article. Like I said, it was pretty cool looking back and seeing how things went from their perspective. You gotta wonder, with John Frusciante recently coming back to the Chili Peppers, if they will be able to create another album that reaches the same level of height and recognition, have as much success as Californication did. I hope so. Only time will tell. So that does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.